Thank you all for coming. Today I'm gonna do a talk on the concept of disease, especially from the position of philosophy of medicine. We've already heard a few times this week that only 20% of our health comes from our interactions with doctors, right? Hospitals. Yet, we see in a lot of philosophy of medicine that the development of the concept of disease is still very focused on medicine itself. And that makes sense, right? In the medical context, we need a concept of disease that's usable in medicine and that's not overly complex, so it loses its usability. So, to that effect, I'm going to try and present a concept of disease, which one is pluralist in that it integrates multiple existing concepts of dysfunction, one that opens up a biosemiotic analysis of disease by bringing value into the concept of function, and in doing so makes it possible for systems to not only be diseased, but also disordered or mistaken. I will do so in a way that makes it multiscalar, such that it can integrate the complexities of ecological, sociological, and holobiontic relations, and in a way that it remains useful within a simplified context, such as medicine. Now, the philosophy of medicine is traditionally divided between what we would call naturalism on the one hand, which conceptualizes disease as a objective dysfunction, right? We look at how do systems normally operate, and if they diverge from that, then they are objectively a disease. Counter to that, we see constructivists who quite justifiably say, look, disease is also a very normative concept. We as a society have thought of homosexuality, of left-handedness as diseases. And so what we really should be looking at for disease is what do we disvalue as a society? Now, of course, both of these become difficult, especially when we say, oh, constructivism. So any society could say that anything is a disease, or in naturalist, if a certain pathogen would be normalized within a group, would that then not be a disease? This is one of the reasons why nowadays so-called hybrid theories are a lot more popular. Now, what a hybrid theory does is it really takes the naturalist part and the constructivist parts and it just puts them right next together. Wakefield, for instance, says that there are two parts to disease, namely one, that it's harmful, and two, that's a dysfunction, where harmful is taken as a negative value and dysfunction is considered a biological defect of an evolutionary established function. The main issue with this is that we haven't gone beyond the dichotomy that we see between naturalists and constructivists. There is no functionalizing of value systems, and there's no value in the function systems. To this reason, I'm gonna reimagine how we can approach function by integrating value and how we can think about value construction from a functionalist perspective. So first, I'm going to follow Wouter's in dividing up the general way we think about function in 4 parts. One, there's an activity, right? What it does, the heart beats, or what it is capable of, right? The heart is capable of beating, heart is capable of speeding up, slowing down. The role concept of function, which says, okay, the heart pumps blood for the cardiovascular system, supplying oxygen and nutrients to the body, right? It's a contextual, systemic concept of function. Usually, this is also called Cummins or causal role theory of function and is very much associated with advantage, right? Why is it used in that context? Because it has a survival or reproduction advantage. Now, Wouter pulls these two together and places role and advantage apart from each other. And I'll explain why in the next slide. And then finally, we have the classical selected effect concept of function, which kind of says the function of anything is that which it originates for or what it was originally for when it evolved in the evolutionary line. Now, the reason why Wouters pulls advantage and role from each other is because of what we call the problem of indeterminate reference. And it says, if x is the function of y for z, because x contributes to the survival of z, then counterfactually, we should also be able to prove that if x had not been the function of y, z would have less survival success. But let's say our animal did not have a heart. The animal would have been completely different. The heart is taken as an isolated part, lifted out of its context, and we would have to make up all the possible counterfactual organisms and environmental relations, which would have made the heart indeed a better option. This isn't possible, so says Millikan as well. So what do we do? Now, Walter says we need to take them as two separate things, and we need to treat them differently. And when we think about function, we shouldn't think about items, right? We don't think about the heart. We think about the characteristics of the system. So we would say, what is the advantage of a heart? No, what is the advantage of the beating of the heart, right? Or counterfactual at that point, right? What would happen if the heart didn't beat is constrained by the role. Because if the heart doesn't beat, there's only so many counterfactuals within the systemic role. This heart beating plays a role, which makes it easier to limit. On the other hand, the advantage now holds explanatory power regarding the purpose for a system as a whole, right? Why would it even be there? We can reintroduce, and here I'm expanding on Wouters's conception, the other two functional concepts as well, right? The activity, what does the beating of the heart itself, the thing we measure in science, describes the actions and affordances of the parts for the system as a whole, in the same way that the role contextualizes the actions and affordances capable in the activity of these parts. And we could go back to selected affect, and I have added here modern history, because as I said before, one of the biggest issues with selected affect theory is that things evolve for other reasons than why they're now used. Birds, for instance, it's thought that their hollow bones were originally evolved for temperature management. Now, would we nowadays still describe the function of the hollow bones as temperature management? Probably not, right? Their role in flying is much more prominent. So Millikan argues in his own paper for a modern history analysis, which says we shouldn't be looking at why it originated, but how it contributed to the maintenance of said animal, right? So this is interesting because what this also shows us is that we can have different levels of historical analysis relative to some advantage, which will give us more room to play. Now, I'm going to move a bit away from the traditional way of looking at these functions, and I'm going to change two of them. So first, I'm changing advantage to purpose. Tinbergen already noted about causal role theories that the student of survival value, so to speak, looks forward in time. And don't forget, Jos de Mul also reminded us on Monday about Dennis Noble saying that purpose and intentions are two sides of the same coin. An analysis of purpose within such a system therefore also opens up a biosemiotic dimension, namely one where we can say, okay, there is here a semiotic process, which again has explanatory value also in relation to the role of a larger system. And we see that in making decisions, these decisions are also already part of a wider living system for which these decisions matter. So we can skip this. Now, we've said that we can have several concepts of functions and they're interrelated, right? We need a purpose to think about the system as a whole. We need purpose to inform us about the possibilities of historical origination, right? We don't make up why an evolutionary trait was evolved. We do so by being informed by the research we do of actual living systems we can analyze. Now, let's look at the multiscales, the multiscalar levels of this functional organization. There's a difference between case-selected and air-selected animals. A case-selected animal is humans, it's elephants, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 children, and we spend a lot of energy keeping these children alive. There's, however, also R-selected animals, like our turtle over here. Now, turtles have about 2,000 children in their lifetime, and I think about 1.5 survives, which, you know, is fine, because evolutionarily, for the purpose of reproduction, this is a totally functional system. It's just that, on average, for most turtles, this isn't really that functional at all. Relative to their benchmark environment in which they evolved, most turtles just die. They're dysfunctional relative to their environment and relative to the reproduction strategy of their line as a whole. Something interesting here is that we see that a functional process on the level of evolutionary reproduction doesn't have to be functional at all, on average, on the level of the organism itself. Different levels of organization can have functions and dysfunctions. In fact, it can be functional to have those dysfunctions in the process incorporated. So, how are we going to use this? Well, we should look at belief, because social belief, in many ways, also has a functional content, right? Many of the ideas that we have, they're not original to us. We grew up in a specific culture and we believe it for particular reasons. So when we look at our reason for why we disvalue a certain dysfunction, a certain state, let's for instance say homosexuality, that can be the result of a social system we've created, right? So let's say we have our turtle. Now these turtles are a lot smarter, and these turtles have a beautiful turtle culture. And what it's really like to be a turtle is to smoke, because real turtles smoke. And it's an important part of their economy. A lot of what we do in turtle world, it's all dependent on smoking. And sure, I mean, we lose a turtle here or there, but it's not, turtles die anyway, right? Smoking is healthy and it's turtle-like. So at this point, what do we do? What do we treat? And how do we use this complexity in a way that's still usable from a medical point of view and that still kind of limits the way that we approach it? Well, we can say first, okay, what happens? The turtle dies. Here's a turtle is dead. A dysfunction in a living system ended its viability as a living system due to a buildup of damage. Okay? A buildup of damage. A properly functioning processing of harmful input leads to damage, right? There's nothing dysfunctional here in the first place. Sure, the turtle died, but it did so for reasons that we would expect. Smoking. The turtle smoked as it believes it was healthy and expected in its society. Belief generation, marketing, and social expectations convince the turtle that smoking is healthy. Systemic dependence. Economic and social interests are so intertwined with smoking that it is required for their own stability. Now, from a medical perspective, we can still say, okay, it is the organism that comes to the doctor. But the ability to then take the functional analysis and take one step further, go into the psychosocial, and see if there are other levels at which maybe it's easier to make a change, right? It's going to be difficult to change the biological buildup of the turtle such that smoking is actually healthy for it. Might be possible in the future. I don't know. Right now, it's very difficult, very expensive. So from a usability context, creating these levels of functional analysis that are pluralists can be context scalable. They are open to socially induced dysfunction, which also opens the concept of analytic disease to critiques from public health theorists, right, who have always said, look, it's nice that you have a concept of disease, but it's not open and usable for in this case, the smoking, where the real dysfunction lies, and the easiest solution to the dysfunction is the level of the social. And it's even capable of complexifying in the biological context, because we could even say this analysis relative to a cell is the same, right? Part of our body kills a lot of cells, like induced dysfunction and killing cells off is a normal part of how we organize itself. And so we can even use this to look at different levels of function and barrier and to create a constraint by which it doesn't become overly complex or overly difficult to use. Now, there's still the problem of stigma, right? One of the reasons why constructivists say, well, maybe we should just do away with the concept of disease altogether. It's not really useful. I don't think that's a good way to go, because taking up a proper analysis of dysfunction should hopefully show that disease shouldn't be stignified. In fact, as we just talked about in relation to the turtles or in relation to the smoking from a social systemic point of view, it's very normal for dysfunction to be induced by another level of organization, right? These are normal biological processes. So the question we should be asking is not, should we say something is diseased? It's at what level should we solve this issue, right? Where is it easiest at any point in time to step in and do something about it? So to conclude, what I think is important is that working towards a biosemiotic concept of disease, we take a functional pluralism that builds on existing biological debates and concepts of function, which makes them easier to digest from people in the existing field of medicine and philosophy of medicine, one that's multiscalar and open to socially originated dysfunctions, and therefore also open to a functionalization of value, both in the biological but also in the social, also opening up, I think, a whole field, an easy way to to connect people like Luhmann with the biosemiotic project at large, and hopefully at some point colonizing the cybernetic space fully. Accepting that this function is a natural part of functional processes, because these functional processes are always nested, always in connection, while remaining the capacity to become contextually simplifiable, right? Even though we now took the social part into our analysis of disease, at the hospital, we can still say, well, you know, we don't go further than the organismic part because that's what we can do, right? Maybe we can give some advice for the social or the psychological or immediate social parts, but we can go on to do like the work of changing society as a whole. So that's my concept of disease that I'm working up, and thank you for listening. Yes, Alexei.
So, your suggestion to take away the notion of disease seems to be strange, because the essence of life is ability to categorize your own state as healthy or not healthy. So that's how life basically functions. So we categorize our state, and every organism does that. The question is, at what level of hierarchy we do this categorization?
Mm-hmm.
This can be done on the level of a single cell. So a single cell decides that it is not healthy and it goes into apoptosis.
Yeah.
And this is beneficial for the organism.
Yeah.
Then the organism also can do a suicide, and an organism can go to the doctor or not go to the doctor. And it's personal matter.
Mm-hmm.
So, why should we say that disease is just doesn't exist? It exists,
Oh.
and it should be categorized. The question is how society should take the disease. And here I agree with you that we should not say that a society should always consider disease as something that it should take care of. So not always. Sometimes it doesn't take care of us at all. So we can go to the hospital and we get nothing there.
Absolutely.
But
so
force your child to change its sex and says that his sex is a disease. That would be probably a big problem. So
yeah.
I think that the society should not be too much involved into disease and treat only those diseases that the patient asked for.
Yeah, so let me be very clear. I agree with you. I think the disease concept is a very real concept. I think it's relativized by the purpose variable in the epistemic constellation of functional pluralism here, right? So I agree. Disease is a very real concept, right? It's a bit more complex than that. It's just an objective thing we can do, and without moralizing, whether you think we should or should not have society take steps into forcing people to get rid of diseases, or these are choices that we make. So I'm not moralizing here. I'm saying if we're gonna have to make these types of decisions, we should structure it in such a way that we at least take everything into account, right? I think COVID was one of those examples where we said, well, yes, we value the individual and their choice in medical decisions. However, it's not just a choice for yourself, right? There's a social impact on the decisions that society makes for itself. And if enough individuals make incorrect choices, and thereby increasing the cost of healthcare, making the cities more dangerous because there's more mental illness, we also run a risk as a society. And so doing this analysis and seeing, okay, where are the dysfunctions coming from? What are they resultant from? And if you want to stop it, where do we need to make the changes? And what does that mean, right, to the processes that we're gonna affect? Then it's important to take them into account, even if we at the end say, no, it's an individual choice.
Wonderful presentation and wonderful subject that shows us what the level of interdependence is. My question would also be somewhat related to of course, the disease pathologization at different levels may be considered certain. So I would ask, you have been repeatedly saying, where should we intervene? What should we do? What does this mean? Are you referring to, for example, us as group of biosemiotics and thinkers, or the society, or the government, or me as you, money?
Again, I think what's nice about this is that it's scalable to the level that you need, right? I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to tell people when they need to get treatment, right? I'm just giving a framework by which a doctor can say, this is the part that I have knowledge about. Some politicians and societal debate can maybe make decisions about this, right? It's about connecting these things in a way that is continuous and using the same type of language so that it becomes translatable and understandable across disciplinary boundaries. Yeah.
As an example, and this is also drawing attention.
Yes. Yeah.
I want to ask you about, I found it interesting that you went through different levels of function, and I see that as an opportunity in the real world mind space to better explain the science, the physiology of the body, how it works, about
Yeah.
But disease presents in different ways with patterns.
Absolutely.
Evolves into a different way of functioning with the world that they're hesitant to let go.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a difficult question, and I'm probably not going to give a satisfactory answer. But I think one of the nice moves that Wouters makes in splitting up purpose and role is rejecting the idea that items have a purpose, right? We're not talking about the heart having a purpose. We're not talking about the arteries having a purpose. We're talking about processes, really. We're talking about the beating of the heart, right? That is what can be contextualized in a systemic way. That's what we look at for a function. So when you say, like, look, we're compartmentalizing for people in the heart, right? some people are specialized in the heart, some are specialized in that and that and that. What you see is a specialization on the level of items. Now, usually those item groupings, right, they're systemic to a certain extent. So someone will do eyes and nose, right? It's all kind of, these have related things. But that's a compartmentalization based on items, not based on characteristics. Yeah, but so we wouldn't say the heart is dysfunctional, right? We would say something about something that the heart does is not functioning as its purpose would want it. So that's kind of, yeah. Yeah, we just retrain now from, yeah, that's,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Most of it, I mean, I don't know. No, it's interesting that there was a sense of a war on the Bible.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I did a talk on avian influenza in Palermo ages before we had this coronavirus.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that perhaps we should rethink the way that we use this kind of language, like a disease or something. Have a kind of Taoist idea of something yin and yang of things, right? To have make it a more disease is always negative, virus is always negative, but they if you go into the sea, there are millions of different kinds of viruses and they're functional. And in the bat, the virus had a kind of hunky-dory system, was healthy, okay. And then there was a zoonotic event which led to it going into another host.
Mm-hmm.
And then from an amplifier, say pig or something, it then goes into human beings and it's in a completely different environment. And you're thinking, what the hell am I going to do? Because it's not in its kind of natural, almost inverted relationship with its host, which it doesn't kill.
Oh.
So then we have a situation where we suddenly see it as the enemy as the war. So these metaphors which we use often actually go against the science.
I don't necessarily agree, actually, because, and I'm writing another paper on media and propaganda. So what I think a virus does, right? It doesn't, as you say, it doesn't destroy the processes, right? It's just like the cells still function. It kind of hijacks the purpose, right? It starts using the processes of the cell for its own purposes. And when you look at, for instance, how now hybrid warfare is being waged by countries like Russia, right? We don't see only a attack with tanks and bombs. We see them infiltrating our information systems, right? They're trying to infect the populations of our countries to vote and make decisions against their own interests. So I know it kind of sounds harsh, but I think actually what we now see in warfare in the 21st century is very close to the viral contamination strategies that you describe.
Often we do this and without looking at the actual science or the natural state of things. And we do it all the time. And so I'd say that's a bit of a easy switch.
So I wouldn't make the differentiation between war and natural. I think war is a very natural thing. Yeah, it's a different level of organization, but there's. Mm-hmm.
That's not similar to war.
So I would argue then that the injection of not real opinions into social media, and it's spread through infecting actual human beings who then exasperate that spreading, has the same connotation. Obviously, it's different, right? It's a different level of organization, but as a